In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the midnight hour. It is time for Ghost to Ghost. Tonight's subject, we're going to talk about Chillingham Castle. Tonight's co-hosts are Jennifer Verne, our research manager and podcast producer.
Good evening.
And Heather Lawson, our case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
So, Chillingham Castle, boy, there's been a lot of people and a lot of groups there, and this thing has a history that is just incredible.
It is, and I didn't realize just how much it was. It just came across my feed earlier this week, actually, when I was watching a History Hits TV YouTube channel. The Medieval Afterlife with Dr. Eleanor Janega. And I thought, oh, Chillingham, that sounds familiar, but do I remember it? And so I did some research, and I thought, let's do a podcast on it. So let's just dive right in.
Alrighty.
So the castle, in quotes, really, it was a manor house originally. It was originally probably a monastery back in the 12th century. There have been monks in that area since the Saxon times, the 900s. And there were actual travel lanes between the monasteries that the monks would traverse through this area anyway. And it is in the village of Chillingham in Northumberland, England. So for those who don't know where that is, it is up on the northern part, just near the Scottish border.
Yeah.
So this is going to play a prominent role in that conflict. In 1298, King Edward I, Longshanks, stayed at this castle. He was on his way to fight William Wallace at the Battle of Falkirk. And so he did reside here at the castle for a little bit. So much so that they actually built a glazed Gothic window, specially installed for him in his king's room so that he could get more light into the room.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And like I said, the location of it being in the northern part of Northumberland, it was a key staging area for many clashes.
Sure.
Throughout several hundred
between
years.
The Scottish clans and Longshanks, yeah.
Yeah. So much so that in 1344, it was given a license to crenellate.
A license to what?
A license to crenellate.
Oh, that's a heck of a note.
They were able to build battlements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that actually made it from a one-sided tower manor house into a two-tower battlement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then they had a cross piece connecting both towers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the soldiers would march across the...
Yeah. It was a way to monitor the perimeter of the property.
Right.
Yeah.
So imagine you had two tower houses on either side with a walkway. Okay. And then at some point...
How most people imagine...
Castles.
Castles.
Yeah, people don't realize those were also quarters for the men. A lot of those watchtowers, especially depending on how far apart they were,
Precisely.
would have quarters there, and they'd have regular watches, 4 watches
most
a day.
Most people don't realize that's not how castles really work.
No, exactly, because our idea of castle is not what this is.
No, it's the one that we see at Disney World every time we go to Florida.
This is a battle fortification, a fort castle. Mm-hmm. It's not a luxurious castle.
Exactly.
Okay. And it's small. So, if you guys want to look on it, the Wikipedia page that I researched has some good pictures, but the History Hits Medieval Afterlife program on YouTube, pull it up, find it. It's gorgeous pictures. It really is. It's a really interesting building, but it was built in various stages, so you can see just how it's constructed. And then at some point, another section was brought on because it became the seat of the Grey and Bennett families. Later, they became the Earl of Tankerville.
Yes.
In the 15th century, the Earl of Tankervilles were tagged onto that family. But the Grey family has been in England since 1066.
Yes.
They came over with William the Conqueror. So the Grey family has always been very wealthy, very prominent, and they have always been attached and connected to this house. But the stronghold was no longer needed. So things changed, and you can see all the different increments and stagings of the building. So much so that you've got the two towers on either side, and you've got the walkway, the crenellated walkway on one side.
Yes.
Then there was another one that has been built on the opposite side. So it is actually a square. So when I talk about the courtyard later, it is a square courtyard, much like Castle Huska,
Yes.
where there is no really main entrance into the courtyard. It's just surrounded by walls on all four sides. Okay, so that's the kind of courtyard we're looking at. So into the 17th century, after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, we get James I of England, who is James VI of Scotland, right?
Yes.
And he now has the crown of both England and Scotland.
Yes.
Okay, what could be called the Union of the Crowns.
Yeah, because prior to this, that castle was used as jumping off point for most of the battles.
Exactly.
With the Scottish clans, including during the Jacobite War. That was a jump off spot for the English. So
exactly.
Suddenly now he has the kingdom.
Right, he has a kingdom, and so now he uses that as his layover spot when he goes between the different capitals. And actually, his wife, Anne of Denmark, the Queen of England, Queen of Scotland, she and her children stayed there in Chillingham in 1603 on their way to London when James I was crowned.
Yes.
In London. And then James I also stayed there in 1617 on his way back and forth between the two capitals.
Yes.
So it's really been a stronghold in that sector for a long time. And a lot of wars, a lot of battles, and a lot of death. Especially during the uprisings between the Brits and the Scots.
Yeah.
Well, that was really contentious.
The castles were a pivot point. I mean, they were designed for battle. And you had the Scottish lairds that owned their land and had their castles. But if you took a castle, that was something that was a great accomplishment because, generally they had men in them, they had weapons, they had embattlements. But if you could take a castle and hold it, it made all the difference in the world. So, we're talking about a time when, we're talking back in William Wallace. I mean, we're talking about a time when there was a lot of uprisings. And the clans, being Scottish, I can tell you, if the clans can't find anybody else to fight, they'll fight themselves. And I mean, we're just a warring nation. What can I say? But anyway, there was a lot of violence and a lot of death imprinted here.
Yeah. So then, after it became a stronghold, they filled in the moat, they turned the battlements into residential wings, and that's when they added that other section onto the courtyard. So now they have blocked and barricaded everything in. Everything is residential. It's all nice. It's got parklands around it, that sort of thing. And in World War II, it became an army barracks.
Ah,
okay.
Makes sense.
And a lot of the wood from the castle was reportedly used and burned as firewood by the men who were billeted there.
Yes.
So they lost some of that. And then the castle just began to fall into disrepair after that. In the 1980s, it became the home of Sir Edward Humphry Tyrrell Wakefield, a second baronet. But it didn't really technically leave the Grey family because Sir Humphrey's wife is an original member of the Grey family. So she's a direct descendant of the Greys. So although the parklands and everything have all been broken up and sold off, they still have the manor house castle.
Well, and people got to understand, when you owned a castle, you owned hundreds of acres around it.
Oh, yeah.
Woods,
parklands
for
and everything.
And parklands, and I mean, that was standard.
Tenants and rents and everything else like that. So there are today sections of the castle that are still open for the public. There are
it's still residence today.
Yes, yes. The caretakers are still living in
Yes.
It's broken up into apartments.
Yes.
So the caretakers, the conservators do have apartment living there.
Yes.
There are also holiday lets that you can rent.
Yes.
And they do hold ghost tours, nightly ghost tours.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah. So, fun facts. Just a couple of fun facts I found. In 1997, the castle was used as a site for Kate Blanchett's Elizabeth movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, the Great Hall was filmed and different parts of it were used for that. And then there's something called the Chillingham cattle.
Chillingham cattle?
Chillingham cattle, also known as the Chillingham wild cattle. It's a breed of cattle that live in the enclosed park at the Chillingham Castle. It's not owned by Sir Humphry, but it is owned by the county, the state, yeah.
And I'll tell you, Heather has a soft spot for Scottish cows.
Well, these are not Scottish cows, Heather, but they
Close.
they are pretty rare because there's only 138 of these animals.
Wow.
And because they're all interbred. So these are not cattle
So
that
these
are
are more
widespread.
like American or European cattle.
Well, there's 138 of them, and they are approximately equal numbers of males to females.
Yes.
And the herd is remarkably genetically isolated. And they survive despite the inbreeding depression. I don't know how they're doing that, but they are.
Okay.
And actually about 20
Well,
head.
139, that seems kind of odd that they could manage that.
Yep. They have managed it for several hundreds of years, actually.
Without,
Without outside genetics
yeah.
coming in. Nope, no outside. This is
without
completely
failure.
Without failure. Yeah. The estate crown land near.
They look like they kind of got like a long-haired European style. I mean,
exactly.
Not quite all the way Scottish and not quite all the way European.
No, but it's a completely white breed of cattle.
Yeah,
Completely
that's unique.
White. I just thought that was interesting.
That is really interesting.
You hear
I did not know about that.
You hear of parklands throughout England having their own herd of deer and whatnot, but I've never heard of
They got cows.
Yeah.
cows that are so genetically just them.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, and not something that wasn't engineered. This is something that wasn't not by us anyway.
No, it just happened. Just kind of like the horses on Corolla here in North Carolina, right?
Sure. Yes.
Those are genetically special to them,
Yes, because they got isolated.
right? And I think the same thing has happened here, just completely isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But they've kept them isolated.
Now, what Abby? The TV show, something Abbey.
Downtown Abbey.
Downtown Abbey. Is that
Oh,
filmed
Downton
there as
Abbey?
well? Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
No.
just to ask. I didn't
No.
know. I know it's filmed in one of the or two or three of the castles they film it in. And for the record, I've never watched it, so don't write in and go, oh my God, no, I've never
Yeah.
seen it.
We have not watched it.
I think that the Downton Abbey was filmed in the Carnarvon Castle.
That sounds familiar.
And I think that's more in southern, but I honestly I don't know, but I think that it is.
Well, that
I tell you,
more conducive
yeah,
to
this is-
filming,
And this Chillingham Castle is like a fourth of the size of the castle from Downton Abbey.
Oh, yeah.
This is a small
You know what, though?
castle.
Next time me and Heather go over, that will be one I'll ask the guys, can you get me a night there? You know?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can rent the Lady Grey's apartment. Absolutely.
wow.
Just
Wow.
for an overnight or a 2-night stay,
Yeah.
it's possible. So let's delve quickly into the haunts of the Chillingham.
All right.
Okay, so of course there's going to be cold spots throughout the castle, both explained and unexplained. Batteries will tend to drain on the investigators. You'll hear footsteps, voices, people are touched, and people even see apparitions. Now, some people say that there are approximately 50 different spirits here. And from the history that I've gone through here real quick, we're going to go through, I could maybe believe 50.
Yeah.
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 I mean, that's not unheard of, especially when we start talking about the woods here later on.
Yeah.
But let's first start back in the room that we mentioned where Edward Longshanks stayed.
Okay.
It is said in this room there is a dark, malevolent spirit. The spirit can be violent and
Edward.
aggressive. So, yeah, you said
Yeah,
maybe.
it might
But
be
why
Edward.
Edward? Edward only stayed there temporarily, and he surely didn't die there. He didn't spend a whole lot of his time there. It wasn't one of his castles. But
Bailey's punishment against his attitude toward the Scots. No, I'm
Well-
just being Scottish. I had to throw that out. I'm sorry.
Well-
there is no evidence of that. Don't quote me on that.
no,
Yeah.
he was known as the Hammer of the Scots.
Oh, yes, he was. Yeah.
His whole goal was to be the new Arthur.
Yeah.
Now, I listened to a lot of English history and a
Yes.
lot of monarch history. So,
And the one thing you don't want to do is take the history from the movie Braveheart.
No.
It's a great movie,
No.
but it's highly inaccurate.
it is
so
completely
please don't,
inaccurate.
Yeah, don't
so don't
confuse
use that
Yeah.
as your basis.
No.
But Edward wanted more than anything to be sole sovereign king of the entire British Isles, the entire isle, and he believed
he did.
was. So, I mean, he would go to any lengths, and he was a vile and vicious man. I mean, the things that he did, I will not repeat on this podcast. You can listen to it other places.
Oh,
but,
yes, he was. Yeah.
oh, he was vicious and ruthless. So, if he stayed in this place and he was trying to lay out his battle for Falkirk, right, and his plan.
Sure.
And this is Chillingham. When they came to Chillingham, they were abused and viled by the local Scots who were coming down in the area. It was really vicious. So you can imagine, if we do believe in stone tape theory and we believe that energy can get trapped and locked, his viciousness and his anger and his malevolence could be trapped in the walls of that room.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, this was
Just
the
emanate from the
ultimate
wall.
enemy of the Scots.
Oh, without
I mean,
a doubt.
this was William Wallace's and the Bruce. I mean, this was their epitome of an
Yep.
enemy. And I mean, you know, honestly, when you look at it, this guy was trying to do everything he could to exterminate that front, because he
Yep.
saw it as a question, or certainly a issue to his throne and his power.
Yep.
So, I mean, honestly, yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, you know, this. I mean, in that respect, I hadn't thought about that, but that's true. It could be an imprint.
It could be an imprint of just his viciousness, you know?
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
You know, oddly enough, the first time I ever saw this castle, there was a show, I think it was called Fear Factor. There was one in the United States, there's one in England. But or Fear something, I think it was called. And they would have they took these people that were not, these are not people that are part of a paranormal group.
No, this was back in the early 2000s, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they would take them to places, and they had to spend the night. And they would win something, they spend the night. Maybe just bragging rights, I don't remember. But anyway, so, you know, they had these camera rigs that were on their backpack that showed their faces and everything. And and Chillingham was one of the biggest.
Jeez, I remember that now.
Yeah, it was called. I think it was called Fear Factor. I've been trying to find it here as we've been working, and I haven't exactly found it. But they did it. That was, of course, every online TV, you know, paranormal has been there.
There have been a lot there.
But
yeah.
I'll tell you what, this was a show. It was a lot of hype, and they put people in there, and people just couldn't stay. You know, they would run out before it was over with.
Right.
But Chillingham was one whole season of this show, and it was called. I think it was called Fear Factor, and it was used over there. It's not. Don't.
I
confuse it
vaguely
with this one.
remember seeing episodes of that.
I tried to find it, and I found a little bit of notation to it, but the thing was, it was big. And then after that, you know, one of the first and one of the oldest ghost programs for me was Most Haunted.
Most Haunted.
And you know, Yvette Fielding was the one that went, and she did a whole season or half a season there. And I think it, hang on a second, I can tell you which one it is. It was actually season 1, episode 2, started at Chillingham. The one takeaway I got from this is, if I ever get a TV show, I want a full-length leather coat. Those look pretty nice. Anyway, but other than that, I mean, you know, this was interesting. She came in with her usual Derek Court, all those that were around
we know
then.
about Derek.
Yeah, and you know, but still, it was an interesting run-through.
Yeah.
They had another parapsychologist there, you know.
Kieran O'Keefe.
Yeah, no, actually, this was a... I don't know.
Kieran?
No, a young man. And I one thing that I found amusing is they opened their case full of instruments, and they started dragging them out, and I'm thinking, holy shit, that stuff we don't even use anymore.
Right.
But, you know, the field has changed that much. But, I mean,
absolutely.
certainly Chillingham is a noted haunted spot
Well, yeah.
for many reasons.
Right.
And, we talked about one time Ghost Hunters International did a Halloween special. Josh Gates was actually the MC, and they did it there at Chillingham. Chillingham's been a launching point for a lot of paranormal because it's a very active location.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, I think when they say castle, people automatically think this is huge embattlement and all your battlements on it. That's not necessarily the case.
No, this was definitely a small fortification castle.
And I mean, if you go to a lot of the castles on the outreach area of England, prior to going to Scotland, York is probably the biggest outreach castle. But most of them weren't huge, especially during that period of time. They've been built larger since. They were fortifications. They were a military base. Think of it like a military base. They were made for fighting and holding the region. They
weren't meant for the king and his court to come and stay for a month or more.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, some of them obviously had, whoever the earl was elected, they had their quarters there. And, but the king would send his men to guard it and fortify it to be used. And I mean, so last time I was there, I remember we went down to see the museum and you get to see William Wallace's sword, and a lot of people, there's a lot of, the one curator I talked to, he said, there's a lot of misconceptions. I said, oh, that's in the U.S. too. I mean, people get this. He said, these swords were used to dethrone riders, these big two-handed broadsword claymores. Most people, unlike the movie with Bruce Willis, they didn't, or with
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, they didn't carry those. They carried dirks. They were small chopping swords, similar kind of like the Romans carried, because they were used in battle. Or better yet, they got these from the Spaniards. They picked up what they call they were actually a box hilt sword, which was kind of like a scabbard, or not scabbard. I'm sorry, like a cutlass with a fancy handguard that would guard the hand when using it. And those were the two primary weapons there was. And I've had people who certainly misunderstand. They'll say, well, how about the Skeen-Dhu dagger? That was for eating. That wasn't for fighting. Right. And I mean, people need to really look at that because every legend has a little embellishment.
I mean, but that little dagger was there if you needed it.
Yes,
hand to hand.
I'm sure it killed a few people, but not normally. Normally, and just like I always tell people when I go to formal dinner, especially at someone else's house, I never wear a dirk, and they say why? I say, well, that's insulting to the individuals because you're saying that, hey, I don't think you can protect me and my family while I'm here, so I'm wearing a dirk. If you did, that was an immediate insult to the family. So you only wore a Skeen-Dhu because it wasn't a fighting weapon.
Right.
It was an eating weapon. And, that's what you wore in, and that was it. And you didn't do that unless you had some distrust involved in it. But, no, I know Most Haunted did a lot. I mean, like a whole season.
Yeah, so they did.
I think the show you're looking for is Scariest Places on Earth.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
And, I thought it was Fear Factor. It's the Scariest Places on Earth. It's not Fear Factor. And they ran a whole season of people through Chillingham Castle. That was a big one before they changed down. I think the next one they went to was the grounds of the most haunted place in England. God, hang on a minute. I got to reference a book here real quick so I can remember it. It's not there anymore. It's been torn down, and give me a second. Oh hell. Never mind. Anyway, it was they walled up a nun. I'm trying to think. My mind just went off to the sideways. This has been torn down. It was an abbey. It was called the most evil, most haunted place in England, and it was originally a monastery and a convent. A monk and a...
You're not talking about Borley Rectory?
Borley Rectory, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I thought, how did he forget Borley Rectory?
Well, it's one of those days. Yeah, normally, how would I? Because, most famous rectory, most famous haunted spot in England, I forgot it already. Damn, we should have got better scotch. Anyway,
maybe it's too much scotch.
There's never such thing as too much scotch, It just... the good stuff doesn't affect you as bad. But anyway...
Most Haunted's historian, Richard Felix.
Yes. He's a neat guy.
He is a very neat guy. And actually, I found a YouTube of him interviewing the then historian of the castle. And there was no date on there that I could see. But it had to have been mid-2000s. And that guy's name was Bob. And that's where I got some of this information from. But then on the History Hits Medieval Afterlife, Eleanor Janega, she was interviewing the current historian Richard.
Yes.
So that's where most of this information came from.
Side note, aren't you going? No, I know you're going to England or Scotland. You're going this year?
No, we're going next June.
Next year.
Okay. Yeah, we're definitely going to England, but I'm not going to be able to get up that far.
No. Yeah, well, that's people don't understand. It's like traveling around the United States. If you go, when you go to visit something, if you go to Washington D.C., you may not have time to get all the regions around there.
Exactly.
When I went last time, I had a lot of good brothers in a lodge helping me from Tower Lodge and other areas, and they go, where do you want to go? Well, you can go to the touristy things, but I was the only guy that goes, I want to hunt ghosts. And they go, well, it'll be a little harder, but we'll work this out. And, they did really well. I did get to see, the one thing I want to do is see the things I haven't seen. I've been to the Templar Church. I've been to Rosslyn Chapel. I've been through all these. Now, I want to go back and see where my family lived. We recently, 2 years ago, we lost our clan chief. No, it's been about a year ago.
I thought it was last year.
It was last year, I think it was. He passed the McLaren candidate because Lawson is a SEPTA McLaren. So, those areas, but, we always laugh because me and Heather are probably part of that handful of people. When we go on vacation, we look up and see where the nearest haunted sites are,
Yeah, without a doubt.
One of the roller derbies she did years ago, I remember we were in Ohio. And I looked there and I said, we're not into cryptozoology, but there's a park area here that's had a lot of Bigfoot sightings. We probably ought to run through that one time before you go home. It's always one of those kind of things. But Chillingham is definitely one of my top.
Well, I was just going to say, as a Scot, you may not want to go to Chillingham.
Because it would irritate the ghosts there, I imagine, because those are primarily English ghosts, I bet.
Yeah, primarily the butcher of the Scots. His name is John Sage. He had been a lieutenant, but he had a severe leg injury, so he got sidelined. And so because he was no longer able to fight, he became the torturer. Yeah. And he hated the Scots.
Lieutenant.
He just hated them. So over a period of about 3 years, he tortured and killed upwards of over 1,000 people in that castle.
Yes.
And there's a torture chamber that they have on display. Now, the torture chamber is not housed in the original torture chamber. They actually had to seal the original torture chamber off because of a seance that went wrong.
Oh, really?
So they actually banned the public from there.
It's still accessible. They just don't allow anybody in it.
I don't even know I'm sure that they can access it, but you can't.
Well, what was the castle? Now, help me out here. The castle had the Black Dinner, the one where the devil came to play cards. There's an area there on the other side of the fireplace. They sealed off as a result of it.
Yes.
And so it could be along that same line.
Yeah. So they sealed that
this guy, actually, Sage was known for his invention or improvement of the rack.
Yeah. I mean, they go into extreme detail about what John Sage
this guy lived to torture people.
He was abysmal. I mean, but in the torture room, they have what he would have used, not his originals.
Yes.
But then they also go through the entire processes of the evolution of torture. So there are things in that area that never were. That area was used, and it's right off the courtyard. So it would not have been the torture room.
Those were always
the
kept.
Basement.
Yeah. Yes, most certainly.
But that area would have been wine cellars, and actually during the Victorian age, they had blocked off the archways there, and those were the servant quarters.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's now been turned into this museum.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that one of the hot spots there, where the arches are at and the servants' quarters were at?
Yes.
Seems like I remember that from one of the shows.
So, not only that, but those archways lead into the courtyard, which we're going to get to here in just a second.
And what do they use every courtyard for? Well, parties, executions.
Well, John Sage was actually publicly hanged in the courtyard, and then he was dismembered. I mean, in gory,
which was not unusual. Practice.
Right, but they're said to see
drawn and quartered.
John roam the castle with disembodied voices and even a full apparition of him. But
when they did William Wallace, they draw and quartered,
right?
And they sent his limbs out to different areas. And one thing I will say about the movie, it was accurate, was it didn't have the effect Longshanks was looking for. Instead, it bonded the Scottish people even closer, and it started a bigger war that he would eventually end up losing in the long run.
Yeah,
so,
it would. But no, the courtyard right there was also, not only was it the place where John Sage was hanged and dismembered,
yes,
but it was also the scene where a brutal death of children, and at the hands of John Sage. They were going to be overrun, and before they were taken, he wanted all prisoners within the castle killed.
So the children were prisoners.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
However, in the courtyard, despite that awful event that took place, the most well-known claim in that courtyard is hearing children laughing and playing.
Really?
Which is very interesting.
Wow.
And that is one of the biggest claims in the castle, too, is the sound of children's laughter and the sound of children playing on the grounds in the courtyard, which is bizarre.
And creepy.
I mean, but it's not a negative sound. It's a happy sound.
It's a nice sound, but...
Yeah.
Except
unless it's 3 a.m. and you don't have any kids.
Yeah. So there is a separate dungeon area that is not part of the torture chamber, obviously. Yes. You have cells and you have the torture chamber. And in the dungeon area, there are at least 2 spirits of prisoners. And they are said to be arguing over whose fault it is that they're in the dungeon. And so much so, yes, that they actually argue. So much so that the historian for the mid-200s, Bob, he said a woman was actually upset with him that he had not cleared the space before he locked the door because she could still hear 2 guys in there arguing to get out. And he said, ma'am, it's the spirits. And she goes, there are no such thing as ghosts. You have locked somebody in there. You need to go. And so he goes, well,
last words.
He's like, come with me. Let's go, and I'll show you. So when they got there, he opened the door and she looked in and there's nobody there. And he said at that point, her face just went white. And it's okay. And he said that's the claim that they hear all the time is they hear 2 men arguing in there.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're going to move on into the residential side here a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to go into what's called the Pink Room. Now, the Pink Room,
in this, yes.
The Pink Room is now an apartment that you can rent for let. It is said that there were skeletal remains of a young boy and fragments of blue cloth were discovered during a renovation at some point in the castle's history. And it's believed that he was bricked up alive. Now, this blue boy is also known as the Radiant Boy, and he is extremely well known in the Chillingham lore. And whenever he tends to appear, a blue halo or a glow will appear first. And then the apparition of the young boy walks into a room. Now, this story predates the finding of the remains. So they were having this occurrence happen before they found the remains. So then once the remains were then found, they're like, oh, well, that must be this apparition we keep seeing. So they gave the bones a Christian burial, and then the sighting stopped. But then Sir Humphry started letting the rooms out. And as he was letting the rooms out, people started seeing this glow again. Now, I don't know about the apparition, but they still see the blue glow. And it comes from within the wall.
Now, Humphreys, the family's still alive.
Sir Humphry. Yeah. So Sir Humphry was actually interviewed in one of the YouTube videos I was watching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was actually telling some interesting stories. But Sir Humphry always points out that in the section of wall that they claim to see this electric light come from, there is no electrics in that wall. There were no electric wires added into that wall. So you can't use that as a source of,
explanation.
Explanation. Yeah. So then the next room we're going to go to is the chapel. Now, this is not the original chapel. So I think that this chapel is in the second tower. Okay. So when the
original... It's not unusual to have more than one chapel in a single family castle.
And especially when the castle goes through as many renovations as this fort went through. There was just the original first tower. And if we think it was a monastery, then there would have been a chapel on that side.
But and a lot of times in monasteries, especially we have monasteries and you have convents all in the same spot, the nuns will have their chapel, the fathers will have their chapel.
Correct.
And, that's how that
because they did not
then
have
they had usually one large chapel, which was used for weddings and, masses and so forth.
But this was not that type of a complex at all. No. So in the 1300s, the chapel was then moved over into the second tower, and that's what we're calling the chapel today. At one point, that chapel had been turned into a library. And then when Sir Humphry was doing more renovations and changes, he found like what looks like a baptismal font type thing. So he reckoned that was actually the chapel. So he turned it back into the chapel.
Yes.
So that's what it is now. Claims are that 3 skulls were found in this room. Just skulls. 2 were buried or placed into the wall under the stained glass window opening, seat.
Yeah, seal, whatever, yeah.
And then a smaller 3rd skull was found in a back corner under floorboards. And this would have been the skull of a child. Now, they say that it's the skull of a girl. But, of course, if you have just a skull, you don't know this. There's no way to tell the sex.
Almost impossible,
It is impossible. I mean, all children are going to have gray skull, very
soft skulls. They're developing, especially at that age.
They're going to be almost identical.
Exactly.
In the skull, anyhow.
So the only way that they can say that this is a girl is, of course, from psychics who have come in. So the psychics who come in say that this is a female spirit of a child who's very frail, very skittish.
So I think she died of maybe illness or something.
Yes.
Injury or birth defect or something.
No. Different psychics have come in differently, that she was one of the prisoner children that have come in.
Okay.
And that
makes sense.
She was just left in this cold, dark room and probably died of hypothermia, pneumonia, some sort of illness. Just sort of faded away. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, who knows? Because if this really was a place where they did awful torture, who knows how this poor child died,
yes.
But this spirit is said to pull the curtains, or she'll pull ponytails of women who are in the chapel.
But
she'll throw books.
This is such a formula for a haunting that's incredible with all the, certainly with all the believed torture and everything. This is building to be quite the high. It explains why everybody wanted to be there at least one time or another, and why the one show ran a lot of a whole season there.
Yes, because this isn't the castle like we have said many times. This isn't the castle in our sense of castles. This
you don't see Tinkerbell here. Let me tell you that. Yeah.
No. This is a war house. This is a This is a place for soldiers and whatnot.
Yes.
The next area we're going to go to is next to the dungeons, and it's called the still room.
Okay.
Now, when you see pictures of this, it looks like a kitchen to me. It looks like a kitchen to me. That's what it looks like. A kitchen. I mean,
like a medieval kitchen.
Yes.
Okay, with a fireplace to cook with and all that kind of
tables, chairs.
We're not talking Formica counters and dishwashers and so forth.
No. Very medieval looking type place to sit, eat, drink, that sort of thing. Like I said, it's right next to the dungeon, and at one point it was used as the castle treasury. So the guards would get locked in every night for their watch. A single guard locked in to protect the treasury.
Yeah.
So the story goes that a guard, while he was taking his watch, was suddenly startled by an old, frail woman asking for water. So he turns to go get the water, and then comes back like, "Whoa, wait! I'm supposed to be alone in here. Wait a second."
Yeah, I'm going to say this is. I've seen this in watch standing. People standing watch. If you're standing watch in a locked-in tower, and someone approaches you like a frail lady and asks for water,
you got a problem.
Yeah, the first thing you should think of is, why is she here, and why don't I challenge her because she doesn't belong here?
No,
right?
Hold on. Let me get that for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he does. He goes to get the water, comes back, and she's gone. And then he's like, wait a second, I was supposed to have been locked in.
Exactly.
So, okay.
That's when you look at him and go, what was your general orders again? Did you miss that? I mean, what's your 8th general order? Tell me that one, and then we'll discuss it from there.
So
dear God.
She is also seen currently. I mean, and they call her the pantry ghost.
Pantry ghost.
Pantry ghost. They feel that maybe she was a scullery maid of some sort. Or
probably a servant of some sort,
a kitchen cook that was poisoned in the still room at some point.
That makes you wonder why they would poison the cook. It must have been some pretty damn bad food.
Maybe she was a Scottish.
She was a taster.
Yeah, a taster or Scottish. I thought about that. That's a good one.
Taster.
Yeah, a taster. That could well be a royal taster.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe she was John Sage's taster. Yeah.
Tasted her last tasting.
Yeah.
But the funny thing, and I found this funny, and maybe just a smidge unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've never been there, but this just had a ring of fishiness to me. There is also the story of a Spanish witch.
Really?
Who has cursed the castle before she was killed. Now, one story said that it was an evil curse on the castle and she was killed.
Okay.
And she cursed the castle before she was killed.
Now, what time period are we talking about? Are we talking about, before the Jacobite Wars or after? I mean, when does she come in, or do you know?
I don't know.
Oh, okay,
I don't know when
that's
she
fine.
comes
I'm just
in.
trying to picture this. Because, Spaniards were rare over there.
Right. So
during that period, anyway.
The other story is that she had put a positive curse on the castle.
A blessing.
As a protection.
Or charm, yeah.
Right? As a protection. But basically the curse is, much like the Bell Witch, if you remove anything from the castle, you are going to be cursed with bad luck. So they do have in the still room a bunch of memorabilia that has been sent back with letters. Hey, took this from the castle.
Please take this back and tell the witch I said I'm sorry.
My life now sucks, so please take it back, and I hope to get better luck. Right? There is above a piano or some sort of a cabinet that I saw a picture of a woman who does look of Spanish descent. I could not really formulate a time period for her based on the photo.
Sure.
Based on the painting, I mean. But to me, that seemed a little bit off from what the other influences and atmosphere of the castle is.
Because usually there was very little Spanish introduction during those years. I mean, the Spaniards were fighting the French at the time. They weren't really fighting. Yeah, it's
possible because, I mean, the English tried to broker a lot of relations with the Spanish.
That's true.
So it's possible, but it just seemed a little bit out of place in the other tales that are being told of this castle.
And there's a lot of superstition wherever you go. I remember I just saw something I read the other day, and it reminded me that, back in the day when I first started seeing MREs came out, sea rats had chiclets. That was your snack, your candy, your sugar.
Right.
And, chiclets were okay. I mean, I wasn't real big on, but they came out with charms for a while in these.
Those were good.
Yeah, and the only problem is a lot of guys...
Or you got Tootsie Rolls.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the Tootsie Roll. I never got any Tootsie Rolls. But anyway, charms, most of the guys would throw them out because there was this stigma that they were bad luck. If you ate the charms out of your MRE, either your group would be attacked that night or you'd run into resistance or something would happen. Whatever, it was a bad mojo. And that's why they quit putting them in. They because people were throwing them away, they weren't eating them. Personally, I love charms. But when you're out in an area that has a lot of aggressional issues going on, and you have aggressors left and right, you don't eat the charms. You don't take any chances.
That's weird. That's weird.
But again, these are kind of some of the superstitions that you have.
Yeah.
And I mean, if this gal's protecting that castle, especially that tower in that room,
possibly
you don't want to take anything out of there.
But I mean, based on what we know of this castle's existence as a fort, I don't know why a high...
It doesn't make a lot of sense logically.
And the painting seemed like a high-born lady.
Yeah.
But of course,
maybe
if it happened after the fortifications were nullified and the Greys are now living there, maybe during Lady Berkeley's time, we're going to talk about here in a minute. Maybe when it became a residence, maybe she was in residence.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll give you one possibility, and this is going to piss everybody off and they're going to go nuts. One of the things happened, being a Knight Templar back in 1300 when the Knights split, and when the Pope, actually it was King Philip of France, issued the roundup order, a lot of them went to Spain and Portugal. And I'm wondering if maybe not so much Spanish as she was Portuguese, and they made a lot of pacts. And I'm wondering if this is a lady of Highborn that was there when the English shift happened and maybe got caught in the middle of that. I mean, it's an option. I mean, I'm just spitting in the wind here.
Yeah, no,
but there was a lot of brothers that went to Portugal that were, and the other big country was Scotland.
Yeah.
That took a lot of the Knight Templars in.
Yeah,
and
that's
I mean,
true.
just a thought,
Yeah, it's possible. But it just seemed to come out of left field for me. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. But the last one we're going to talk about inside the castle itself is the former resident, Lady Mary Berkeley Grey. She was the wife of Lord Grey from the 1340s. And it is said that she still roams the halls. Lord Grey actually ran off with her sister, with Lady Mary's sister, Lady Henrietta Berkeley.
And there it is.
There it is.
Country song.
Chillingham After Dark. Anyway.
So this left Lady Mary and her young daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. They didn't say about dog. Although
those famous words of Jack Sparrow: "If you had a sister and a dog, I'd take the dog."
Right.
Anyway, yeah. Sorry.
There is a dog, and I'll come back to that in a second. But so Lady Mary is actually rumored to just still be walking around the castle, forlornly looking for her husband or her sister.
Yes.
And she has been known to push people down the stairs, according to legend. But you'll
Already
hear
has
her.
an ex-wife attitude. Yeah.
I wonder if those people resemble one or the other.
I don't know.
Yeah, it could be the reason she gave him a shove.
Maybe. So, but Lady Grey's rooms can also be for let.
Yeah.
Okay, and they actually share a fireplace with the pink room with the radiant boy. Yep, they're on the same level. They share the fireplace. So they are back to back. So, whenever anybody says, "Oh, well, this spirit haunts this room and this spirit haunts that room," they can go further than just their room.
Yeah, and this gets back into the theory.
Like that room.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
I have people go, "Well, I thought that, we call it the Beetlejuice effect, whether it's stranded to a house or a room." That's not always the case. We've had some investigations have led us.
And why would it be?
Yeah, I mean,
why would it be? Unless you use Reverend Shaw's protection spells and try to barricade and block somebody in, using iron
then that's
or whatever.
different. Then you're trapping them.
But for your normal run-of-the-mill haunt, I don't see where a spirit would confine itself to
and
one
I would
room.
hope if I was left or I could travel a bit because, of course I have a list of names I'm going to work on. But anyway, all that said, just think about it. Why would you? Being a member of the Annapolis Scottish Rite Cathedral, I was told by many members, they said, this place, the cathedral, is haunted to no end. Well, it makes good sense. For the last 100 years, brothers that thought the world of that building, they died. And I remember one brother told me, he says, they don't go home because they didn't want to put up with their wives. What they do is they go to the cathedral and stay there. Whatever the reason being, it certainly leads credence to the fact that could be what's happening.
Right.
And if I was in a cathedral, I want to walk the whole cathedral. I wouldn't want to be stuck in one room or the auditorium because, you think about how many things that go on in there. Yep. That auditorium, if you're lucky, you get one thing a month. And that's it. Now, you might get a month that has a conclave or a reunion or a membership, and you may have 4 or 5, 6 days, especially if it's Grand Lodge, and then you have the convocation in there, and okay, you might use it, but then the rest of the months, it's empty.
Right.
And, it makes you wonder. So I'm just saying, it makes sense to be able to move more if they're able to. And sometimes I just wonder if it's, this goes back to the Beetlejuice effect, if it's something that they have to learn how to do to move to other areas,
Yeah, that's a good idea, something to think about. Because we obviously don't know how this works yet. Eventually, one day we'll know how this works, but,
God, I hope it's in our era, and I hope
I know. But these echoes of the past don't just happen in the castle itself. Although you can see the soldiers walking the rooftops. The
battlements,
The battlements, The most reliable place to get a haunt. Not the most active, necessarily. Mm-hmm. I guess you can say it's the most active. But the most reliable place that you're actually going to be able to see something is in the dark woods and the Monk's Trail.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So...
Monk's Trail.
Mm-hmm. So when we spoke earlier, we talked about how there were monasteries in the area, and the monks would travel between the monasteries.
Yeah.
So there are massive gardens there, and there are two different things going on. So we have the monks walking through, and you can still see the monks walking through the trails. Okay. But there are also 3 massive hanging trees that are in these gardens. 2 of these trees have actually fallen over but not died.
Wow.
So they have just sort of leaned all the way over, and they still have a root system. The root system still is growing. The trees are still growing, but they're just on the ground. These trees were used during the time of John Sage and probably before and after as hanging trees. During that time, though, it wasn't the hanging that we think of with a neck break or whatever, quick hanging. They would hang.
Well, most hangings back then, people don't realize were not quick, or accurate.
Right. No, they would hang people upside down. They would hang them by their arms, by just so they would hang in the trees.
Be in pain until death.
Until death. A long, slow death. And these bodies were never buried, never put in consecrated ground. They were just, they died, decayed on the tree, the bones fell to the ground, were scattered by scavengers, whatever. Yeah. They are even still finding bones coming up out of the ground to this day. 900-year-old bones are still coming up.
Wow.
And when the monks would travel through the forest on their trails from one monastery to...
Yes.
They would be known sometimes to cut down a person to end their suffering.
Bury them. Yeah.
Right? Well, sometimes these monks were caught doing that, and so then the monks were hung.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So Bob said on his nightly walks, on his ghost walks through the woods, people would take pictures, or people would actually see the monks.
Sure.
And so the most reliable thing to happen is to catch a monk in your photo camera in the woods.
Wow.
Yeah. So, don't be surprised if you're out there and you look and you see a monk through the trees, because that's the most reliable claim to happen on the grounds there.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
I after this, I certainly am more reinforced I want to be there one time. I mean, the bad thing is, we were talking about England, no different than the United States. There's a lot of land to cover, and you have to get in different places. And sometimes it's a 4-hour drive. And to get some of the places we need to be. But I would certainly love to spend some time there. I think we're going to add this to the list. So when we get there, we can take a look at a few of these places.
This would be an amazing place.
Oh, God, yes, it would. It would.
Yeah, it really, especially since you can sleep and stay in an apartment.
Oh, yeah. You can stay there.
Yeah, that's
even
that's
we couldn't,
amazing.
I still want to go through it on tour at the very minimal. And then, I was thinking about several other places. There's some places in Whitehall that are on the Ripper tour that I'd like to go visit, and there's several things I'm making footnotes of. So, well, folks, I want to reach out before we do our cite our sources here. I want to reach out to my son, Josh Lawson, and his lovely wife, Melissa, and thank you for listening. And their friend, Jose, I appreciate you for listening. Again, we appreciate all of our listeners. If you will go to the Facebook page and make a comment, tell us how much you like or dislike an episode, we'll recognize you on the next Ghost to Ghost episode. So please reach out to us, let us know you're there. So, well, at this time, we're going to wrap up for this evening, and we're going to go into the ghost story of the day with Jennifer Verne.
Today's ghost story of the day is from Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings by Marie D. Jones. Culloden Moor. The Battle of Culloden in Scotland was fought on April 16, 1746. The bloody rebellion of Jacobite soldiers was motivated by the desire to return to the Stuarts to the throne. But they were vastly outnumbered. Within 40 minutes, the entire Bonnie Prince Charlie's army was dead, either exhausted from the long days of marching back to England or by the government forces that charged them at their weakest. Those lucky enough to escape the initial artillery fire from government forces fell on the enemy front lines, especially when the government army utilized a new type of attack called the Highland Charge. Enemy soldiers stabbed the Highlanders with swords and bayonets in a manner that pierced the Scottish army's sword arms, which were unprotected. Anyone who survived that was subsequently slaughtered. Bonnie Prince Charlie was able to evade death and escape to Italy, never return to his homeland. Those who visit the site hear the cries of the wounded, the clank and the crash of steel weapons, and visually witness the ghosts of the dead soldiers rise and fight, then vanish. Locals say birds living in trees near the battlefield refuse to sing during the time the soldiers appear.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.